In this short video, we're going to take a look at some common problems that might be experienced with boilers. So here are a few hints and tips of things that you can try for yourself or get your tenant to try before you call out the gas engineer and incur emergency call-out charges. The first thing to check is what sort of gas meter is in your property. If you've got a standard meter where the tenant pays by direct debit, then this point is not appropriate for you. However, if there's any chance at all that the tenant could have changed the meter to a pay-as-you-go style meter without you knowing about it, or you have one of these pay-as-you-go meters in the property, then the first thing to check is that the tenant does actually have credit on the gas meter. We've had several occasions in the past where the tenant has reported that the boiler has stopped functioning, whereas in fact the real problem is that they haven't topped up the gas meter and so there's no gas to fire up the boiler. So that's a really good one to check, and you can do that over the phone. If your tenant does have one of these pay-as-you-go meters, there are options for emergency credit to get the heating on, for example, if it's late at night or over the weekend, and then they can sort out the credit later in their own time. Another common problem is that the pressure in the system loop that the boiler and the radiators work on drops for some reason. There should be a gauge on the boiler, and this should be around 1 bar pressure in the system. Very occasionally the pressure can drop. This can be several reasons. For example, there might be a very, very small leak on a radiator somewhere, and once the boiler pressure reduces to a certain amount, the boiler has a safety mechanism on it and will switch itself off for safety purposes. A quick and easy way to resolve this issue is simply to top the loop up. There will be a simple way to top the pressure up. There will be some pipes and valves underneath the boiler where the valves can simply be opened and additional water allowed into the system, and this will repressurise the system. It might be that you need to press the reset button on the boiler, or it might just kick in itself once the pressure is up to 1 bar. It is important to keep an eye on this, as if the boiler does keep depressurising over time, then it is likely that you have got a leak somewhere on the system, and this should be investigated further. If it's very, very cold and we've had a severe frost for more than a couple of days and the tenant reports the boiler has stopped working, then the first thing to check is whether the condensate pipe has frozen or not. We have found on properties that we manage that the condensate pipe sometimes isn't adequate enough for the boiler. So that is, the bore or the diameter of the condensate pipe is not necessarily what it should be. And in these situations, what happens is the condensation that goes through this exhaust pipe freezes. Once it freezes, the boiler again has a safety feature and it will automatically close itself off. It is fairly simple to defrost these pipes simply by pouring warm water over them to defrost the pipes. It's worth asking your tenant various different questions about the exact problem that they are facing. For example, it might be that the upstairs radiators are no longer heating up, yet they have heat downstairs and hot water. In situations like this, it's likely that there is excess air in the system, and the problem can be resolved by simply bleeding the radiators. This problem often comes hand in hand with the boiler pressure dropping out from time to time. If you have got a small leak on the system and the tenants are constantly topping up the water pressure, it's likely that this will generate air in the system as well, and therefore you are likely to have a joint problem of constantly needing to bleed radiators. And the final top tip is to check with the tenant that the thermostat is working correctly. It might be that the radio link or the Wi-Fi link between the thermostat and the boiler has dropped out, and therefore the thermostat is no longer communicating with the boiler. It might also simply be that the thermostat's batteries have run out. Again, speaking from experience, tenant reported that the boiler was no longer working, when in fact all that had happened was that the battery in the thermostat had failed, and all they needed to do was to replace the battery and everything was up and running again. So there's a few quick tips that you can use to help your tenants get the heating back on in their property without having to call out an engineer. If there's anything else over and above this, then you do need an engineer out. Neither you nor your tenant should be opening the boiler, so taking the front off or interfering with the workings in any way, shape or form. All you want to be doing is topping up the loop and pressing the reset button, and that's it. Anything else you do need a gas engineer for. Hopefully that's really helpful and will save you a bit of money on call out charges in future.